If you are currently learning more than 2 piano pieces at the same time, this video is for you. A question I'm getting asked more and more these days is, how do you play so many pieces at the same time while also maintaining the quality and balancing out learning some, polishing others, and memorizing yet another camp of them? So there is, first of all, not one answer to this question. That would be absurd if there was, and of course it would have been figured out by now and everyone would know it. Often the reason these things get continually asked for decades and centuries is because in every situation there's a different solution, and depending on who you ask, how much repertoire, the advice I give somebody that has 20 minutes of pieces versus somebody else that has 2 hours of pieces would be slightly different. But that said, I do think that there's at least a principle and a philosophy that can be applied to all situations, and that's what I'll be getting into today. So I'm not a stranger to this. Any point in my career, I've gone from having 2 pieces to 2.5 hours of pieces, multiple concertos and a solo recital at the same time, things like this. I've done major international competitions and even won a couple of them myself. And at the summer of 2020, during COVID, I learned all of Rock 3 from the ground up and basically finished off and memorized Mozart's Concerto 22 in E-flat major. And I was doing both at the same time over about a 100-day period. So one of them was mostly review, one of them was brand new, but I finished both of them in that amount of time. So, and I could go on and on with crazy stories. If you've seen, one more example, if you've seen my Rite of Spring on YouTube, a lot of people have no idea, but that was actually part of an entire recital. That was the last piece of the second half. In just the second half, I played, it's been a long time, a Bach Prelude and Fugue, Szymanowski Etude, the slow one, B-flat minor, to kind of set the mood. And then I played Debussy's L'Île Joyeuse, actually, all leading up to the Rite of Spring. And then in the first half, I played the Schubert D major sonata to start the concert. Worst mistake of my life. Unwarmed up. It's a 45-minute sonata. All full of technicalities, and the slow movement is like 17 minutes or something. Impossibly hard to just feel good about right away. And then I played 3 pyrotechnical etudes, Rachmaninoff, Chopin, and Liszt, and that was the first half. So what people don't understand about that Rite of Spring is that was me after I was tired. I had to do that at the end. It's not like it was just a one-off. And I share that because it's not terribly apparent in the recording that there was any sign of fatigue, and it's because of how I trained at that point for that performance, which was well over 2 hours of playtime. And that's very different than how I train on the average week or the average month that may not have anything near as demanding. So the principles that have always helped me has been that you have to put things into clear categories and put them on rotation. And this actually comes directly from John Perry, who taught at the Oberlin School. And that's who taught my teacher, Mark Westcott. And he always said, you should have things that you're practicing every day, things that you're practicing about every 3 days, things that you're practicing about once a week, and then things that you could just play once a month and still be at the same level at. So he basically put things into 4 categories. I take that a step farther. I just say there's 4 levels of difficulty at any piece at any given moment of that piece. So a very hard etude, for example, Liszt Mazeppa. That piece is it's really hard, but not every measure is really hard. And not every measure is equally as hard as others that they're still all roughly the top skill, but then there's a little edge on a certain part, right? So you can have a hard piece and have very easy moments within it. So you have to not just kind of think of, well, I should practice my Liszt etude all the time and my Haydn sonata a little less. That's not exactly how it works. You have to think of every passage, every phrase, even a transition within a couple of hard sections might still be the takeaway that really needs to work. And you have to be aware of what is personally challenging for you. So level 4, in my opinion, is the hardest of the hard, where almost everything you try is a failure. You try to play it at tempo, can't do it. You try to voice it, can't do it. You're trying to get hand independence, you can't do it. Like that, the things that are just really frustrating, that's a level 4 difficulty. 3 is about, like roughly 50-50, where about every other note is that challenging, and then every other note you can kind of get away with and fake, right? So again, it's not like a certain technique. I can't say, well, octaves are always level 4 and then single notes are level 3. That's not true at all, because there are some octave passages that are a toss-off, like, and then there's other octave passages, like Tchaikovsky, where he does fourths and thirds in them, and I miss them every time. So it's like, those two things are similar, but one of them is a 4 and one of them is a 3 or a 2. So about every other note gives you trouble. And then a level 2 is like, it's mostly easy. So out of every line, you might have 1 or 2 spots that messes you up. But for the most part, it's not going to. So the 4 and the 2 are opposite. Almost everything is hard, barely anything can be done without thinking about it. 2 is almost everything is easy, barely anything throws you off. 3 is somewhere in the middle. So 1 then is reserved for what I call, you can play it in your sleep. And that's what John Perry said, that the stuff you practice like once a month. Obviously, if you're only practicing it once every 30 days, it can't be that hard. And even there, it's relative, because you change throughout time. So for me, when I first learned the Red Riding Hood Etude by Rachmaninoff, it was so incredibly challenging. I couldn't even play the notes at like a quarter tempo lightly at all. Like anything, it was stiff, it was impossible. But now, because I played it almost 200 times by memory in performance for an actual audience, now that's one of those in my sleep pieces. I haven't even warmed up today at all. Zero piano playing except for a few octaves in this video. And this is my baseline level of the Rachmaninoff Etude, no warming up. So on and so forth. Now, the thing with that is, there was a time where that was a 4. It was like the top of 4s. I couldn't do it at all. Now, I actually do put it in the 1. Like 90% of that piece is a 1 category for me. Couple spots are 2, like the left hand at the end. Like, I haven't worked on that piece in probably 2.5, 3 years now at all. And that I would have to kind of warm up a little bit with to be fresh on. But like for the most part, the rest of it is not a challenge. That said, it was a transformation. So this is a fluid process. You can't just say, well, octaves are my weakness, so that's always a 4. They might be a 4 today, and you work on them for 3 days, and they're a 3 later this week. And you can bring a level 2 to a level 1 within a couple of days. So always be re-evaluating this. When you now understand where all the categories are, now you know what to spend the most time on. So the way I juggle a lot of pieces, first of all, is at every measure and every interaction of every piece, identify it as the level 1, 2, 3, or 4 category. Then, step 2 is definitely do not practice all of the pieces all the time. Like, let's say you have a month. You're playing 6 pieces, and you practice an hour a day. Even a lot of people try to put about the same amount of time into everything. So they say, well, I have an hour, 6 pieces, so I'm going to do 10 minutes per piece for a month straight. Maybe that's a good idea, but the problem with that is, what if you spend 10 minutes on something that's not that challenging for your Rachmaninoff Etude, and then you spend another 10 minutes on something that's impossibly hard in your Mozart Sonata? And you think, well, I just need to give it equal amount of time. The problem is you don't have enough time to solve the Mozart problem, and you probably didn't spend enough time, or you probably spent too much time on the Rachmaninoff issue that wasn't that much of an issue. So you adjust the plan and say, I'm going to do 5 minutes on Rachmaninoff because it's on maintenance mode. It's a level 2. And I'm going to do 15 minutes on Mozart because it's a level 3 or 4. So you should not spend the same amount of time on things that are different difficulty levels. That seems basic, but so many people don't do this. They just put an equal amount on everything. And actually, many people put too much time or more time on the things that are easier. Every time I hear somebody play a famous piece like Moonlight Sonata or Clair de Lune or Mozart K545, they'll start off and it's totally under control. First page is like perfect, and then they get kind of like, start messing up all over the place. Because, more than likely, the majority of their time was spent on the first page, regardless of how hard it was. And then by the time they got to the second or third page, they put less time into it. And that's not because it's harder. The thing is, my teacher said, if every measure was the first measure, we wouldn't think of it as hard. Everyone can nail their first measure. Even Opus 10 number 1, like... If that was a random measure in the piece, I bet you anything I would have mistakes in it. Because when I go to like anything else, you know... see, already some mistakes. Because it's like in page 2. There's just this like doomed cycle we have where we just kind of start from the beginning over and over. And the beginning gets like 5 to 10 times more practice than anything in the middle. So I do everything I can to break that cycle and break that habit by just randomly starting at measures that aren't even the beginning of a phrase. I'll often just start at like measure 17 out of nowhere and say, can I be as confident as I am on measure 1 as if this is measure 1? Changes your mindset. So basically balance out your practice so you feel like everything is getting the attention it deserves. Your level 10 effort is going into your level 10 priority. Not just, I'm practicing hard and putting in the reps on everything. Like that doesn't really get you anywhere. And it's the same in life, by the way, a little life lesson here. If you were to take anything, you know, health, business, finance, family, all of that, you really shouldn't, you don't have the same amount of hours for everything in every moment of your life. And so you should be spending your time prioritizing what you want to grow in those areas, you know, and it's not something that you just sit there and do. You don't have 2 hours a day for everything, right? So there's a season where you want to grow your relationship, you prioritize dates. There's a season where you want to prioritize your spirituality. You go read the Bible or your favorite religious text, and you put some meditation in the beginning of your morning. There's all these seasons where it's like you only can do so much each day. So you have to choose what you're going to do and what you want to grow in. It's the same in practice. You can't separate that. But so many people do, which is why I'm kind of going in circles here, because it just really, you really have to understand this lesson. That is, if you want to actually get better at the fastest rate. I have met people occasionally who have flat out said, I really don't care about getting better at the fastest rate. I'm fine to just take 2 years and learn this piece. And frankly, I'm not your guy then, because what I talk about is the stuff that takes 2 years and I get you done in 3 months. I shave off, 8 times faster of the effort and the time involved. And mainly it's just through taking away things that are getting in your way rather than doing new habits. So in any case, kind of the third thing that would be the factor in how much time I spend on everything is what I call doing the math. You look at a deadline and you work backwards. So when I did that famous Stravinsky performance, the recital I mentioned earlier, I was going to the Virginia Waring International Piano Competition in 2017. I got accepted in October to the competition, which was to happen in March, right? Yeah, like March, I don't know, 19th or something. It was towards the end of the month. And I go, okay, well, I have almost half a year. Almost. It was the beginning of October, so it was about 5 months, roughly. And, well, no, wait a minute, that would have been 6. Yeah, 5.5 months, whatever. And I thought, okay, I've almost learned all of the pieces, not quite. So the first thing I have to do is just learn all the notes. Just make sure, like, I have that, right? You obviously can't build polished layers if you don't even know the notes, the fingerings, and the rhythm. Like, that's the basic core foundation. So I think I took about a month to do that. Just clean up passages I hadn't looked at, touch on some memory spots and stuff like that. And then I had about 4.5 months left. And from there, this is where the doing the math comes in. I literally said, okay, well, I want to take these break days. My teacher said take every Sunday off. He recommended that, which I did for the most part. So I have said, okay, 6 days of practice a week. I was in a gap year between high school and college. So I decided to start, I didn't even get a job. My parents said, as long as you're working really hard at piano, you can live here rent-free and not have to get a job. But, we expect high standard, and so I did that. I practiced 6 to 8 hours per day at the instrument for those 6 months, especially when there was the news I got accepted to the competition, which only 30 people did, it was kind of a big deal. I was only one of 3 Americans that even made it into an American competition. Kind of weird. But it happened, and I said, okay, so I have 6 days a week for whatever, 4 months. I don't remember the exact number. And therefore, I have this many hours between now and the competition. And I compared the total number of hours with, this was a tedious process, but with every single thing I wanted to do to improve those pieces. So it was over 2 hours of repertoire because there was all that stuff I mentioned in the solo recital earlier, plus a concerto, if I remember right. I actually didn't do the concerto category, but I had the Liszt Tarantella at the same time, and I believe maybe another, the Beethoven Opus 2 No. 2 Sonata. So 2 complete classical sonatas. And the Beethoven itself was a good 25 minutes. So yeah, it was over 2 hours of repertoire. I planned it all out, and then for each piece and each movement of each piece, I made a complete bullet point list of everything I wanted to improve in. And I said, okay, well, it's the scales here in measure 17. It's the arpeggios don't have the right effect, and the pedaling's always mushy here. And it wasn't just like what notes could be faster or cleaner. It was every category: balance, pedaling, articulation, fingering, shaping, artistic presentation, and like a sense of warmth and musicality and all these things, right? It was well over 200 bullet points between those pieces. And I said, so I have this many hours and this many things to accomplish. And then I took a guess at how long it was going to take me to accomplish each bullet. Some bullets were like, if I practice that for 10 minutes, it'll probably be there. Other bullets will be like, that's a 3-hour goal, just that one point, because it was, I played the Bach Busoni fugue in D major, which I can't do anymore at all. But it was all double sixths, and it was terribly hard. And I thought, okay, just getting that 6th passage alone could be 2 to 3 hours, right? So I estimated how long it was going to take, and I did the math, and I said, worst case, if I don't get to all this, what am I okay not getting with? And I started crossing things off the list, saying I'll get to that later. And that process, I want to say, took about 3 days or something of really just crafting it out, at least 2 days of the majority of my practice time, really just kind of going through the pieces, making notes, and planning it. But the thing is, you can scale that back. If you're doing 2 pieces and have a month deadline, spend half an hour planning. But you have to have planning involved, because if you don't, you're just like aiming at a piece mindlessly, not knowing exactly how you're going to conquer it. That would be like trying to climb Mount Everest and not having a tour guide or a map or any proven strategy of somebody who went before you that knows how to climb that mountain. Like, that's just not going to happen at all. You could like go on and keep walking. You're still not going to find your way to the top, because there are so many things you need to know to make that happen. It's the same in our piano learning. If we're playing pieces, especially like the Rite of Spring or the Schubert Sonata, all of which were above my level at that time, you're not going to climb that hill if you don't have a plan and exactly know, here are the stumbling blocks, and here's what I'm going to do to fix those so that they're no longer stumbling blocks. You have to have a plan. So the larger the project, the larger the amount of time, the more time you should spend planning. Like I said, it was about 2 or 3 days for me. I went back, and then I go, now here's what I need to do. And then from there, I made a weekly plan of get the big stuff done first. Here's week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, blah, 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 through I think like 16 weeks, which was 4 months. And I ran it by my teacher. He said, yep, looks good. We're gonna do that. We're gonna take a week off at Christmas, and that's about it. And other than that, you're like gonna sell yourself to this until you go to that competition. So that was not only one of the best seasoned times of my career, but it was also the most successful all around in terms of the performance that is on YouTube, which also the Rachmaninoff Red Riding Hood Etude is also from that same recital. You can view that as well. The competition went very well. The first round, I made it through. And actually, I feel like it was 95% of how well I could have played. There was a few things that were just really dumb, insignificant mistakes. Things, even in the opening of the Beethoven, instead of, I think I did like F. Or, just dumb things like that. And I was like, seriously? After all this time, like I messed up the easiest part? But that happened. And they pushed me to round 2. And in round 2, I played the Rite of Spring. And if you've heard the YouTube performance, there's no way to like prove this, except for the fact that I genuinely felt that the live version at the competition was better. It had more energy, it was more accurate, it had less memory slips. It was like heat on for the entire time. And I was like, I got it. I nailed it. I have this in the bag. And they didn't advance me to the third round, which is, I know I'm on a little bit of a tangent, but there's a lesson here. Because I was like, wait a minute. I played like 90 to 95% of my ability round one, and they put me forward. Now I just played like 101% of my ability, and they didn't put me forward. And I wasn't actually that discouraged, but I was very surprised. And my teacher flew down from Portland to come watch it, just because it was like, it's kind of a big deal if you have a student in an international competition. He just wanted to enjoy the process. And he also felt the same way. He was like, I would have cut you at round one. He was really picky. He's like, with that Beethoven, you had some things in there that, you know, the style was just about perfect, but you had a lot of things that could have cut you. And he's like, I was halfway through your Stravinsky and knowing you're going to get to the second round. So who knows what happened there. But what I learned through that process is it's really not about the external fulfillment we get. It's really all about the internal. And that's why I'm sharing this story. Because my preparation helped me to feel confident and to play the best I ever played and to remember that story for life. And because I went through that, I will always have that experience to reflect back on and know, here's what I do. It worked then, it will work again for the optimal time. So if a conductor today emails me and says, do you want to play Rock 3 in 2 months? I'll be like, okay, I'm going to go through the process, list every measure, blah, 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 create the plan, do the math, work backwards, hit the priorities, and I could feel just as good because I've seen what that process leads to at the highest level. So yeah, anyway, I mean, I could talk all day about this. I'm not sure if this is like exactly what people are looking for when they're looking for the roadmap to juggling pieces. But the thing is, like I said at the beginning, there is not one roadmap. There is processes, there are systems you can put in place. There's a set of logic you can use to divide that. So if I had to summarize this entire, like probably 30-minute video into one sentence, it would be spend the most amount of time that you have on the things that are the hardest, the most amount of times, and that will lead you to the biggest transformation that will set your goal straight. So that was not planned. I was trying to find the right words, but that's the right idea. So if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, and I've got tons and tons of resources in the description, a free piano guide, as well as a community I run for amateur pianists and even professionals to grow to their next level. It's called the Key Learners Piano Club, and you can learn all about it from the description link.